Okay, so we're doing hip and squat style mobility. So things working and assessing your own squat, whether it be that you'll notice stiffness in your hips, right versus left, front versus back, as far as front of the hip flexors, or maybe back, low back, or posterior glute, or ankle tightness, all of the above. You'll get to kind of assess for yourself. If you are someone that is watching this later versus those that are already on the call, you may or may not want a either light-ish weight that you could use, or odd object, even a backpack, something you could hold that could just allow you to sit comfortably at the bottom of your squat, so you can play around with feeling out the tension at the very beginning, because we're going to do kind of a flow of a lot of active squat style movements today. Other option would be that you could hold onto a countertop or a couch, something that's not going to tip over onto you if you use it to assist you to be able to relax in the bottom of your squat. If you can sit at the bottom of your squat super collapsed and comfortable, you'll be fine, because you'll get to play with it as is. But that's the only optional prop for today if you would like it. So we're going to start out with you barefoot, whether it be with or without socks, but no shoes. You're going to find what you feel is your comfortable width or distance for your squat. If you are turning out a bit with your toes like I am based on ankle, make sure that your knees are also following in that same pattern. And let's just go through a set of roughly, let's say 10, nice and slow. And you're going to feel, depending on what your workouts have been, which there have been lots of squats lately, you're going to feel different parts that are tight. For me, I feel it all in the front of my ankles. It's not even allowing me to test out my hip tightness. And I just want you to play around with it. I want you to be in tune. Do you feel tightness in your knees, tightness in your hips, left side, right side, ankles, back? What do you feel right now? Just doing these in your feet, whatever it may be. Remember that. Go ahead and grab now, if you are that person that wanted the prop to assist you so you can be comfortable at the bottom. You're going to grab your prop, you're going to get in that same position, and you're going to go to the very bottom and let yourself hang out. So for me, in letting myself hang out, I get to use this weight to sit back, because my ankles are a big thing that are tight for me. So you'll be able to see, if you're watching the recording, Catherine's using something she can hold in front of her. That's totally great. I think, Ryan, are you holding on to anything? I can't tell. Your hands are crossed. Okay. Nope, Brian's not holding anything. I don't think Zeke's holding anything either. So they're getting to comfortably hang out at the bottom and play around with it. Now what I want you to do, though, is I want you to play around with, while you're holding, playing around with kind of the angle of your feet, how much you're sitting in with your hips, pushing your knees out, rock side to side a little bit. See what feels tight versus the other. Keep holding. I'm just going to turn sideways so you can see. Right? I'm playing around with kind of dropping my low back and then engaging it, working on my shoulders, being a little bit more erect, pushing my hips down and forward, ankles forward. I'm playing around with all of it. I'm really assessing it. I'm letting myself swivel around. Stay down as much as you can. If you need a break, stand up real quick and then get back down into it. Maybe you play around with how wide you set your feet, right? So for me, I might play around with turning my toes more forward as I get a little bit warmer, really torquing through my feet. So I'm really making sure that I have my big toe, base of my big toe, my heels, and my pinky toes all planted and torqued into the ground. I'm trying to sink a little extra low right now. And then I'm going to sit back upright. Maybe I play around with it again. Find that sweet spot. This might get pretty uncomfortable. I'm getting real sweaty right now. You can probably hear I'm breathing a little heavier, trying to talk and do this at the same time, pushing in and out. I'm starting to now, my ankles don't feel it as much anymore. They're getting pretty warm. My shins are getting pretty warm, but I'm feeling it now in my hip flexors and my adductor, especially on my right side. So that might travel. Keep hanging here. I know it's a delight. So find that spot, play around with it. If you've been sitting stagnant in the same position and not moved at all, I want you to engage at least one muscle that you haven't right now. Sit upright or your shoulders back, whatever it is. Push out on your knees. And then carefully come up out of that position. If you have a weight, I always set it down first. And then I stand up. Everybody's a little bit different. And shake it out. So not super comfortable, right? Went to just the point of like, okay, now I'm getting uncomfortable. I'm getting sweaty. I'm getting hot. This is mobility. It's not a full workout, right? Let's go ahead and swing the legs a little bit. So forward and back, not huge, big, giant swings like you're doing big hip swings for the first few, just little ones, just getting a little bit of squeeze. Okay, this is our first moves of the day. Doesn't have to be crazy. And then try to get them a little bit bigger. So then go
a little larger. You can hold on to something if you need to. Start to get a little bigger when it starts feeling like they're loosening up after doing that squat. And then turn sideways and try to open it up. So what that looks like for those from this is I'm really trying to open up and through. You guys that are on here, that have been to class, that are part of SOTO, you're used to us doing these in class. Forward, backward, side to side. So I'm just giving you guys some time to just loosen up after that one. I might be giving you a lot of extra time if you're someone who feels really loose right now. I've been doing a lot of bike rides. My quads are on fire. So for me, these feel really nice. Okay, when you're done with that, hopefully you were switching around. You can go ahead and put that odd object off to the side. And we're gonna go play through, depending on what you felt was tight, you're gonna play through making sure that you put special focus when I go through these next 3 to 4 kind of movements. We're gonna go through 6 more total, but 3 to 4 next couple movements are, one is more towards toes and feet, the other's a little more towards ankles, the others are more towards hip, and then the last one is hip flexor, right? So we're getting a little bit of rear glute on one of them versus hip flexor, and the feet, we're going feet, one of them is more ankle, that type of stuff. So if you noticed you had any of those things more tight than the other, like for me, ankles were my first limiter, I'm gonna probably spend maybe a little extra time in my next few days or when I add this into my mobility routine doing the foot ones, because I know that that's a weakness for me. If you're someone like, cool, I'll do these foot ones with you, Austin, because I'm on the mobility call or I'm watching it, I'll chalk it up to a lesson learned, but I don't really need help in that area. Maybe you spend more time really focusing in on the hip ones and the glute ones, if that's what you felt. If it's your low back or the opening of the hips that you felt that was harder when you rock side to side, that's what you focus on. But I want you all to try these anyways. So you're gonna go down on your knees and you're just gonna hang out with your feet flat underneath you. So the big thing we're making sure to do is that our feet are facing, you guys are looking this way, straight, so we're not tucking them in to try and cheat and let us get more range of motion on the outside of our ankles. We already know that we have more range of motion rolling in. We want you to go flat with it, and then I want you to sit back and on them. You might even feel this in your knees, but you don't feel them in your feet. Everybody's a little bit different, right? If you feel them in your knees, you might have something going on with tibial rotation, which we've talked about 3 weeks ago or something when we did like calves and feet, right? So just thinking about kind of where you feel it, notice it. I always kind of rock back and forth. If you're someone that's sitting back is a lot on the tops of your ankles, if your feet stretching into plantar flexion is real rough on you, come up, back down a little bit, and then come back up, right? So give yourself breaks. Maybe you hold for like a 5 count in your head, and then you off weight it a little bit. Maybe you kind of lean forward on something, so you're kind of pushing down, but you're not sitting directly back on it. Whatever you personally need, where you feel that tension on the top, or if it's in the knee, right, you're playing around with it. If you're someone that feels pain in the knee doing this, first of all, then stop doing it if it's straight up pain for a little bit, but you might try putting like a small towel underneath right here to give you a little space and gapping through where your tibia and femur come together. It might alleviate that pain for you. If it doesn't and you're concerned about it, or if it's a regular occurring issue, come see me or some other professional PT or chiropractor, you know, something like that, someone you trust, because you might actually have something more internal in the joint going on there. So just be nice to yourself, but play around with it and see, because sometimes just loosening these things will help. I also might suggest rolling out your calves if you're feeling a lot of this. Okay, next, the best part. This one is everybody's probably least favorite. You're gonna do a toe squat style. They do these in yoga, where you come up, you spread your toes, and you put them all the way on the ground. So again, I'll try to show you guys a couple angles. So toes are fully spread, trying to go right behind us. So we're not like bending in at all or turning out. Trying to go kind of right behind, big spread through the toes, and then sitting your butt back onto those heels and getting comfortable. I know some of you, when I make you do like bear crawl positions and warm-ups, you feel your wrists and your feet and your toes cramp out or your calves cramp out. I want you sitting on those. I want you to get some range of motion, get comfortable. You can lean back a little if you want a little more intensity, right? If sitting back on it is too much, sit upright, that's fine. Maybe you're someone who takes a bit of a break and you do it for a few seconds, you take a bit of a break. We're gonna hang here for another 30 seconds. We got some time. So as much as you can, get comfortable with being uncomfortable
it's not going to be very pleasant. It might even feel like some of you, it's shredding the bottom of your arches because it's really pulling on how tight they are from all the jumping or lack of mobility we have. Making sure that you're really keeping those toes. I know with carpets, they slide a little. Trying to sit on them. Go to your happy place. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Again, not so much pain that you can't tolerate it. If you need to, bend forward, take some weight off, but get uncomfortable. Let's go 10 more seconds. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Carefully come up off of it, put one foot down, and then the other foot down, push into that carpet, wiggle your toes. If you're on hardwood floor, then just try and stretch, maybe circle your ankles. That might feel really nice. So that right there, sometimes they're called like a toe squat or something like that. It gives you a really good spread, and it gets our feet in the opposite position than what it spends a lot of time in a shoe, than how it spends a lot of time in the shoe. It also allows us to really get that full spread and pressure, which we would need if we're pushing off of our toes. So it's a good way to force some dorsiflexion on the ankle by attacking things that also come into the foot because they affect our ankle mobility as well. The next one we're going to do is we're going to do a squat onto the toes. So a lot of times people, especially in lifting classes, our biggest goal is like, oh, if I could squat to get something off the bottom shelf and my heels don't come off the ground, go me. That's been a goal of mine for like 10 years. And this is as close as I get, right? But what I want you guys to do is actually practice squatting in ways a lot of us real people, instead of all you freaks of nature that are amazing at good squats and good ankle mobility, have to come down onto our toes with our heels up. I want to practice that a little bit. It's functional. We use it in life. And even people that can squat perfectly still come up sometimes to like this one position. So I want you to practice this using that kind of toe squat while we actually really collapse through, because it puts a little bit of a load through our ankle while our toes are in different positions and plays around with it. And then if you can, try to balance through it even better. And you can even kind of rock side to side, right? If you want to. I'm a big fan of playing around with the hip and swiveling through and making yourself come up with it, because that can play with the big toes. Don't strain your toe. Be careful. If you don't do this stuff very much, you might actually strain these little tiny muscles. Hold on to something maybe while you do it. If you need to take a break, sometimes I'll give one foot a break while I test the other. And I hold out like this. Then I bring the other foot back and switch. We're just playing with it, spending some time in these positions. Because it's also getting some good bending going on your knees. And let's be real. Good thing in CrossFit, we practice functional stuff. Well, in life, a lot of times we'll functionally squat down like this instead of always perfectly squatting, right? So it's not a bad thing to practice these things. You can even play around with coming. You can notice my feet, where I'm kind of rocking into the ball of my feet versus into the toe. I'll kind of come sideways, see if you guys can see that even a little bit better. So kind of back versus forward, back versus forward. This plays around with kind of your toe muscles, your toe flexors, all that stuff. Go ahead and relax now, come down to the knees. And let's go back to one more time, doing those feet flat into that plantar stretch. Now for you guys just doing this, this might actually feel better than when you were first sitting on it. It might feel more comfortable now. For some of you, it might feel worse because your calves now feel like they had to get worked. Some of you might feel no different. And then again, kind of coming up, taking a rest if you need to. These are some of my favorite things that I've spent the most time personally doing that I often forget to have people do in classes or just don't do, because they're such small little moves and we try to get efficient stuff practice in gym classes. But since it's all about mobility, I get to share with you guys some of the really seemingly simple but humbling moves of like how flexible our feet are, how sturdy our wrists are, even with some people that have been doing wrist ones when they've been on for those mobility days that are kind of humbling of like, wow, I really suck at these small little simple tasks. Okay, the next part of it, go ahead and sit for a second, and we're just gonna work on activating hip internal rotators and external rotators. So my feet are long. It also will feel nice on your knees for a sec because we've been pretty bent up there for a bit. So I have my feet like this. Hopefully you guys can see me. And then all I'm doing is I'm working from my hips. So not like bending my knees and using just my feet and ankles. I'm trying to keep straight leg and then really go kind of like pigeon toed and duck footed. And I'll like lean back on it a little bit and see with keeping my legs fully locked out as much as I can. And you should start to feel it. You'll feel it a little bit in the front of the calf, so on your shin, but you'll also start to feel like, oh, hey, I'm moving all the way up here by my hip. So playing around with it and seeing how far you can start to really turn it, how inward if you can touch your toes together. And then can I touch the outside of my feet to the ground without bending my knees a bunch, right? And you can play around with sitting forward and doing it, right? Depending on how your pelvis is, you might notice that's harder, easier. It might just be too much stretch on your hamstrings. Everyone's a little bit different. Let's do 6 more. Nice. Good. Okay. Shake it out, rub it off, whatever you got to do. I try to do kind of like ankle circles. And then we're going to do some lateral shifts. So for these ones, you're going to be doing basically what we know of as kind of like the base of a Cossack squat, not all the way down to the bottom, but kind of up in that speed skater style depth. And you're going to shift just back and forth. So hopefully you guys can see me in this one because I got my bed kind of in the way, but you're going to go down into that wider squat, and then you're going to go through lateral shifts. So I'm in kind of that speed skater position. So from the side, one of my side positions looks like this. So my legs straight here, and then going back and forth. And I'm not coming up out of it. I'm staying low. So like Ryan, for example, you're kind of coming up again. Try and stay low the whole time. Like you have a ceiling above you and you can't stand up through it. And you have to go side to side in it. But notice the way that I have my foot. My knee isn't fully over my toe. It is a little, but it's not collapsed forward. My heel's not coming up. And then from the front, just to make sure, I'm also not collapsing in my knee while my butt beats it to the side. I'm keeping it out so that I'm nice and stacked over that position. And then while for me, based on my mobility, I'm not upright a ton, I'm still engaged through my back in a nice hinged, strong core position, as if I was going to weight load a low bar squat or even like a deadlift type position. So I'm still in a good, strong position. Those of you that can be more vertically upright without your knees collapsing in like mine do, again, just making sure that we're keeping a nice sound back. Let's go 3 more each side. I'm gonna just watch you guys, see what we got going on. So Catherine, go a little bit wider with the feet. Those of you that finish your 3, go for it. And I want you to straighten one side while you keep the other bent. Yep. And then go to the other side. And then I want you to make sure that your feet are facing a little more forward. Those of you that are done, go ahead and shake it out a little bit. There you go. And really pushing out on the knees. Good, Catherine. I like that one. So make sure that your glutes and your shoulders aren't going further to the side than your knee is. Your knee should always win. Good. All right. Go ahead and shake it out, guys. That one gets sweaty for me, but it's a really great one too by keeping it active. Instead of worrying about how low you get, staying a little higher, but then shuffling back and forth can be really good for heating up those adductors and loosening those glutes. So the next one we're gonna do, you guys all know this one. We're gonna just do a hip flexor stretch, just kind of up in a tall runner stretch. So just like this, and we're just gonna move through it. So something you guys can do, and the reason I brought this one in, because it just feels nice after doing some of those, is thinking about the front leg. When we come down, we can shift through kind of that hip girdle coming up and through, and then sitting upright. So that's something that we can add in. That gets a little bit, we can even let it kind of fall out to the side, even letting the foot roll with it, right? Like that's fine if you're working through and you're not weighted and you're rolling through that ankle and really keeping that hip square. But I like to make sure that I'm moving it. And then sometimes I'll do like that little crescent moon, but I keep my foot planted, where now I'm really making sure that I'm getting some of that tension through the hip and not just allowing myself to go out because it's the foot, right? So I play with both. The other thing that sometimes I'll do is if I have the ability to, which I try to do minimal props for mobility, but if you personally have a band, like a long band that we use at the gym, you could put it around your leg and then attach it behind you, shut it in a doorway or wrap it around a rack if you have it at your house, so that it pulls backward and really tractions that hip, right? So you might have it up and around. Keep playing on that side, guys. We're doing 2 minutes on each side. Having it up and around here, and then tractioning back to something behind you so that you can sink in, and it really pulls down and back on the femur while your hip travels forward to get a really nice traction stretch. So if you have that available, that's something you could set up as well at home, or if you have a rack or a doorway that you could lock it into. So play with that if you want. But otherwise, thinking about really squeezing that backside glute, squaring the hips, and then moving through it. Let's go ahead and straighten the leg back a little bit. We'll do that 5 times before we switch sides. So just getting a little bit in the front leg, so some hammy stretch. Not so much that feels like it's gonna pull away from your knee, but just a little something. Go ahead and switch sides, guys. So same thing on this side. And I just keep it moving. And you can come down like I did at the beginning, right? And you can rock through it this way. You can roll out to the side where you let your foot actually roll with it. You can sit upright and let it roll. However you want to play. This is your mobility time. Also, I appreciate anybody watching this later, but also everyone that's on here right now. We got Ryan, Zeke, and Catherine. Big shout out for joining me at this modified 2:30 time. I have a long bike ride I'm going on tomorrow, and I don't want to risk the ferries that I don't get back here in time for you guys. So I appreciate all of you for being adaptable. Playing around with it a little bit, squeezing the butt on the back side if you want. You could even, sometimes I'll even like walk away, kind of opening up away, and then sometimes I'll turn towards. Another little thing you could throw in. Anything that you've probably seen in yoga before, we've done in class, again, we do, and is allowed right now to just play through it. Let's go ahead. No, it hasn't been as long as that other one because I was showing you guys the optional band stretch, but let's go ahead and sink through that front leg again. You can play around with then when you're sinking through that front, you can even like, little bonus, you could play around with your foot coming up and back, and you might be like, whoo, all of a sudden I get some calf in there. Some of you might be like, Austin must be incredibly tight because I don't feel anything. That's also true, but play around with where you're at. All right, guys, out of that one, okay, we have 2 more we're doing, right? One of them's a straight leg, kind of like triangle style pose, and we're kind of doing with like a sassy hip and playing around with the pelvis and a shift. So watch first, so hopefully we can see the differences. So we're not bending the knees to go side to side. Our legs are locked out, as long as you're someone that vascularly can lock out your legs and not pass out, okay, just to be clear. And then we're going to drop hip to hip. So I'm just side to side, kind of sassy hip. So from here, I call it sassy hip, it's not the actual name, right? But I'm doing it through my hip girdle. It's not through my knees. So you'll see, if I get real close to where you just see the hip, legs are straight, and then I'm just dropping, like I'm trying to drop this side into this side, or this part of my, my pelvic crease towards my hip, and then the other way. And then rocking, locked out. Like I could hang here for forever. I could hang here for forever. It might feel a bit of stretch here, but I'm rocking back and forth. And then what you can add into that is you can go down onto either a bench. If you're someone who's flexible, you can go down onto the ground and add that same hip drop. And so you're going back and forth. And then the other thing you can play around with in this time is tucking the pelvis and extending the pelvis. So it's just little tiny moves. You can see my legs aren't changing, my knees aren't bending. So play around with that while you guys on camera are playing with it. Don't worry, I'm not just setting you up for entertainment value for the rest of us, right? And again, you can kind of sink down one side to the other, sinking, whatever works for you. You're gonna really feel if one side's more restricted. Again, since I have a band here, if you have this available to you ever, taking one of those big long bands, wrapping it up in that hip crease, taking it back, hooking it either in a door or around a rig, and then going through that position and that stretch, again, is tractioning that femur backwards, creating space in the joint, and can allow you to do this same stretch that you're doing now or bent over with that traction back. You're just gonna feel it.
It might feel kind of funky, but you might feel like you have like one side right on this outside that's way tighter than the other, or one side adductor that's way tighter than the other, and playing around with it. And if only I were skilled enough, maybe eventually I could lead a workshop on twerking from this, but I definitely don't know how to do that. So just enjoy my one sassy hip move that I know. That can be really good. So let's go ahead, if you haven't, that's on video, let's switch to doing those pelvic tilts. And you can do those if you want to standing. You can also do those laying down, where you're tilting and tucking, tilting and tucking. And I'm not crunching up to tuck. I'm literally just tucking my butt under, pushing my low back to the ground, up and down. So you can do pelvic tilts. You can also do kind of side to side, like through hip hiking, but just playing around. We're just moving your pelvis and your hip girdle. You can do it standing as well. You can do it kneeling. Just showing you guys different options. So doing it kneeling, so like you're dumping out a bowl of water or you're scooping up some sand, right? So just tucking here. The last one that some people really like is like cat-cow style, but you're doing it just to the low back. So I'm not collapsing through all of it and arching through all of it. I'm keeping my back pretty level, and I'm just pushing my tailbone up to the sky and then tucking it under. So it's just my low back. Again, it's not my full upper and lower big camel or cat-cow, whatever you want to call it. It's just the lower part. These are really good things to do to activate those little muscles and activators so your body has a sense of awareness of where a full tilt would be in either direction, so it can level off and find that neutral. Let's go ahead and bring it back to the center. We have one last thing we're going to do, and I want you guys to watch this one as well. I've had people do this sometimes in class. This is a really awesome one now, playing again with the pelvis side and opening the hips and activating hip openers. So we did some passive ones just now that were with stretching. We rotated our feet in and out to get some actual femur rotation, stuff like that. Now what you're going to do is you're going to do a single leg stand, hip hinging, and then opening it up. Now you can hold on to stuff. I highly recommend when you're first learning this, you hold on to things and you make it less about balancing and more about opening the hip. So again, I'll demo real quick. I'm going to hold on to the side of my armoire here, and I'll try to show from a couple angles. I bend a little bit in the knee just so that I'm nice and athletically braced instead of locking my knee out. So I do a little bit of bend, nice foot contact in all three spots. And then I take that leg back just like I was doing a single leg deadlift or hip hinge without weight, right? And then what I'm doing is I'm trying to open my hip up by not letting my knee and everything turn in with it, right? I'm just opening it up. I try to fight to push that knee back, and then I'll open it down, and I'll almost kind of tuck behind and then open it back up. So from the side, what that looks like, and then you guys in the video can take off and do it, is two different angles, right? So then I'm going back, and I'm really thinking about using these glute muscles right here, these hip rotators, to open up, almost like I'm peeing on a hydrant, and then closing back down, and then opening back up and closing back down. What that looks like from the other side is my leg goes back, I hip hinge, I open, whoops, as I fall, let me move a little bit. Okay, so I go down, I open up, I close down, and I'm just feeling this in my hip. And then I open up, close down. I make sure that my back, notice, is flat the whole time. I'm not rounding, right? I'm not worrying about how far back my leg is. I'm just thinking about really opening up like a clamshell and closing my hip girdle. So then again, from this side, here, open, trying not to let my knee drift with it, and close. This side, open, and close. And I play around with that back and forth. So I'm going to watch you guys just so I can give pointers to those that are actually on video since you took the time to be here today. Let's go ahead and do 5 opens and closes per side. And it should feel like you're just rotating through your hip. Yep, like you're trying to take one away from the other. Nice. And if you can, try to look with it too. That's going to make it a little easier to really feel yourself opening. And collapsing all the way past, like as if you're trying to close your legs or crisscross them, can also be really helpful, because then you're having to, nice, Ryan,
then you're having to come out of a deficit, right? Where you're actually dipping a little too much so that your body has to force itself to level off. This is playing one side against the other in your pelvis. Let's see what you got, Zeke. Good. And you might not feel like you get very far. One side might be way different. Zeke, go ahead and look that way that you're opening to on the next one. So open up and look that way with your shoulders. Sit back in that heel. Yeah, good. It just allows your spine to move a little bit more together. Instead of getting your opening and twist through your low back, you're getting it through just the hips. Nice, Catherine. Bend that front leg a little more, Catherine, just so you're really nice and comfy. Yep, good. And then opening up. And bring it back. And it might feel weird and different. You're not holding weight on this one. So as long as you don't feel pain or anything in your low back, don't worry so much about, do I look weird? Is it perfect? Am I going to hurt myself? In theory, you should be able to, as CrossFitters, bend over and move and put one leg up or one leg down just fine, especially when we're not holding weight. And what we're focusing on is how we're moving that hip and how you can feel it through the outsides of your glutes to open that up. So once you're done with 5 per side, go ahead and unmute yourselves, and I want to see what people were feeling, because that's the end of all of our flow stuff and active moves today. And I'm curious if we either noted one move was really awful, or it felt better as it went, or one side was really noticeable for you guys. Give me some feedback.
The toe thing was rough.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, does that what kind of benefits does that have besides just flexibility in your toes? Does it build like strength in that, so you could potentially do something like that helps with like explosive movements, running, maybe jumping?
Yeah. So a lot of stuff that flexibility, quote unquote, in general helps is that it allows for, if it's good flexibility and flexibility of spending time breaking apart any fascial tension that's been happening and spending time getting a little bit of a lengthening through like your little muscles, like the little tiny muscles in the bottom of your feet. So like flexor hallucis longus, flexor digitorum longus, flexor brevis, excuse me, all of those types of things. If they get too locked down from always being tiny little stabilizers, if we can stretch them and get more range of motion out of them, imagine the more we can open and extend our arm, the bigger flexion and contraction we can get out of our bicep, right? So if we have these tiny little muscles that get locked down a lot because they're stuck in shoes, or that we don't really stretch and bend them a lot, then we go do things like jump rope and box jumping and coming up onto our toes. We lose some of that range of motion, and it also forces it to where we lose less contraction power, which is what strength is in those muscles, or explosivity is in those muscles, or possibly even the ability to recoil without straining our toes or straining our ankles. So getting better mobility, not just flexibility, but mobility, so ability to move through full ranges of motion, allows for more strength. Sometimes flexibility is where that starts. Flexibility is the ability for something to even flex to that range of motion to begin with. Mobility is then the ability to now move actively through that flexibility. If that makes sense, if those two definitions kind of come together, and those things allow us to be stronger. They allow us to, in theory, run less risk of injury because we can recoil better, we can contract harder and stronger and faster, all that type of stuff. And a big part of it is we just don't spend a lot of time spreading through our toes. And what better way to get our toes to passively and actively spread apart than to use our body weight to push them into that range of motion if our shoes are usually cutting that off. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. Yeah, perfect. So yes, it's always a good thing as long as you're not pushing it to strain or too much pain at one time. Just over time working to get more of that mobility through your feet is always going to be helpful, because every force vector of every activity we do starts with our feet and goes up our system. Good question.
Yeah, the toes were rough for me also. It's very painful. I mean, not like injury painful, but like
no, but it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is good. And so I saw both of you guys too when you were doing it. I was very happy to see that you would sit forward, take a few breaks, or maybe sit back off a little. That's fine, because any range of motion you're getting, if it's a little uncomfortable, is stuff that you're probably not getting regularly. So even a little bit can be really helpful, even if it's just moving in and out of that. It doesn't have to be like, oh, unless you held it for 5 minutes straight, you're going to get no benefit. Like even just making yourself sit that way occasionally or move that way from time to time is going to be a different position than how it is when it's stuck in a shoe or sitting at a desk all day. So that's awesome.
And the hip stuff was really good for me. It feels good. And I have a lot of tension in my hips. So this is good stuff for me.
Great. Love it. The cool thing about doing the single leg thing is you guys can ultimately eventually try to use your hands a little less. Again, if you're not on carpet, it's a little easier, but that's why I like the barefoot. You can grip a little more, practice the gripping in the single leg stand. And that will also allow you to train up kind of your stability, which will allow your hips to move more. If they feel more stable, they'll let you stretch them further. They'll let you put them in more challenging positions because they feel more secure and less vulnerable. So it's the single leg one, and the hip opener stuff is a great one to keep in your regimen on your own time for the stuff we do in CrossFit. So that's good. How about you, Zeke?
I liked it. It was good. I like the pelvic twisting kind of from sitting down
Yeah.
all day. It felt really good. Like just to
Yeah.
leave it. Like I just moved to the left and just stay there. It feels awesome.
Good. I'm glad. Well, perfect. So thanks for joining me on the stuff today, guys. Hopefully you liked it okay as far as getting warm at the beginning, didn't strain anything, and got maybe a few little tips or tricks or just reminders of stuff you haven't done in a while. I'm going to let you guys go for today because I think I've exhausted our time, but thanks for joining me. I'll be back on Thursday. I'll probably jump in. Rose says goodbye and knows I'm done and now brought me her
Bro.
ball. But
Good catch.
we'll
That
see
was
you
awesome.
guys. Yeah, right. I'll see you guys on Thursday for mobility at 12:30. And then if not, I'll also probably see you guys a couple times this week jumping on nighttime workouts if I can this week. So yeah,
Thank you.
Cool.
until then,
Thanks, Austin.
have a good week, guys.
See you later.